Most of us know the story of Jesus' 40 days in the desert. But what if it isn't really a religious text? What if it's actually a profound psychological map, one that details the hidden mechanics of power and consciousness?
Look, don't just take my word for it. Let's start with a really bold claim from the legendary psychoanalyst Carl Jung. He called this story the most psychologically sophisticated narrative in Western literature. I mean, that's a huge statement. So what exactly made him so convinced?
What was the hidden meaning that Jung saw that most of us just completely miss when we hear this story? That's what we're going to decode here. And in the process, we're going to see why almost every revolution risks becoming the very tyranny it set out to overthrow.
So let's get into it with a new map of power. The first act of this psychological drama isn't about some hero fighting a literal demon. No, Jung saw it as a confrontation between two powerful forces that exist inside every single one of us.
First things first, we've got to reframe the antagonist. In Jung's reading, the devil isn't some guy with horns and a pitchfork. It's the internal voice of the ego. You know, that part of our psyche that keeps our consciousness trapped in limitation, in our narrow, conditioned sense of who we are. So the crucial point here is this. The story isn't just a story. It's a blueprint. It actually reveals the three fundamental ways the ego maintains control and actively tries to stop our psychological or, spiritual awakening.
All right, Act 2, the confrontation. Let's get to the very first temptation and see how this all plays out. This one is all about material control.
So the setup is this. After fasting for 40 days, the hero, Jesus, is starving, and this voice of the ego shows up and makes what sounds like a pretty reasonable suggestion. Hey, if you are the Son of God, command these stones to become bread.
But let's dig a little deeper. On the surface, sure, it's about satisfying hunger. But the psychological trap is way more insidious. It's the temptation to define your entire identity by what you can control and what you can acquire. The ego is basically saying, prove who you are through your power over the material world. Now, the response here is absolutely key. The refusal, man shall not live by bread alone, isn't just a clever comeback. It represents a profound psychological shift. It's a flat-out rejection of a purely materialistic identity. It's a declaration that our true value comes from somewhere deeper, a source Jung called the self, which has nothing to do with our possessions or achievements.
Okay, now we get to the second temptation, which is even more subtle, the lure of spiritual superiority.
This time, the ego takes him to the highest point of the temple and says, if you really are the Son of God, throw yourself down. He'll command his angels to save you. It's basically an invitation to perform a spectacular miracle for everyone to see. And again, the surface temptation to show off some divine protection is hiding a much deeper trap. This is what Jung called spiritual inflation. It's the danger of using your spiritual connection not for liberation, but to establish that you're better than other people, to dominate them. It's the ego wearing spiritual clothing.
So the refusal, you shall not test the Lord your God, is this powerful rejection of using the divine just to validate your ego. Why? Because the true self doesn't need any external proof. It is zero need to perform for an audience or create some kind of hierarchy of who's more enlightened.
And that brings us to the final, and maybe the most sophisticated temptation of them all, the offer of systemic domination.
So here, the ego offers the ultimate prize. All the kingdoms of the world I will give you. Just think about that. An offer to end all suffering, to create justice, to fix everything. But it comes with one tiny condition. If you will fall down and worship me.
This, right here, is Jung's brilliant insight into why power almost always corrupts. To get the power you need to change a system, you first have to play by its rules. You fight corruption, but to win you need power. And in seeking that power, you start to compromise your principles. The system then starts to shape you, and eventually the revolutionary becomes the new tyrant. This is why that final refusal is so absolute. It's a complete rejection of systemic power as a path to real liberation. And why is that? Because you cannot use the methods of control, of domination, of ego, the very tools of the system, to bring about genuine freedom and awakening. The means are totally incompatible with the end.
So where does that leave us? In our final act, what's the resolution? How do we take these lessons and actually choose consciousness over control in our own lives?
The common thread, the thing that ties all three of these temptations together, is this. Every single one is an offer to inflate the ego. Each one is a trap designed to keep us identified with a limited, separate self, our job, our social status, our achievements, instead of waking up to our true universal self.
And this is where this ancient map becomes incredibly relevant to our world right now. The temptation of material power, of turning stones into bread, that's the engine of our entire consumer culture. Social power, throwing yourself from the pinnacle of the temple, well, that's just modern social media and influencer culture, isn't it? That constant drive for likes and validation. And systemic power, the kingdoms of the world, that's fought over every single day in our political and activist movements.
And that brings us to the core choice this story presents, not just to some figure in a desert 2,000 years ago, but to every single one of us, every single day. Power offers to inflate the ego and keep us trapped. Awakening asks us to transcend it. So, the question is, which path will you choose?